with a mixed use project in particular, you're trying to be strategic and thoughtful about which tenants are you putting in there and how do they complement one another and what value are they providing to your other components.
You brought in the brokers early to try and secure a tenant before you fully do the design, which is, a challenge in especially mixed use development. So I guess if you could touch a little bit on how all of that worked and where the brokers really helped, right?
With the hotel component, we didn't involve brokers really in any of the decision-making process on which hotel brand should we or shouldn't we use. There's only a couple of major players that you would consider even going with. And there are so many different restrictions with franchise agreements and areas of protection and a bunch of technicalities from the legal standpoint that's kind of boxed in to an extent. So we had a couple of options that we knew were available, but ultimately it was us doing underwriting on it.
Yeah, and it's kind of in the pro forma, how much value does their franchise bring to the table, right? Because you have to pay them.
Yeah. And so that's a whole separate conversation about because it's not really the brokers that were involved in that. Like we could do just a couple hours on selecting a franchise.
Yeah.
But with the retail component and how do we select those, or how would we select them, that like you said, that really drives a lot of value in who is the tenant or which set of tenants do you have. And that's what I was saying about Centerline's assistance with us in the beginning phases was how are we putting together the full picture, right? What's our tenant mix? And with a mixed use project in particular, you're trying to be strategic and thoughtful about which tenants are you putting in there and how do they complement one another and what value are they providing to your other components. So it's not just about the tenant itself or the additional tenants that will be going in around them, but what value can that then drive into the residences or into the hotel? The prime example for a hotel is you have to have a restaurant, right? Because you want to have some place that the people are going to go eat. They don't have full kitchens. And so that's just the obvious choice. And so if you have a mixed use project where you have a hotel and you have residences, you're going to have the restaurant that's serving the hotel. So the other components of your retail, you don't necessarily want to overbuild with grease traps and places for exhaust and all of that into your residential. It's just not necessary.
Yeah, the hotel restaurant will drive people staying on the property. There's a lot of rooftop bars that tend to get included in some of these hotels as well.
And with our strategy of not building all of these retail components, not doing the mixed use project all in one shot, which is a valid high performing strategy. The Castello strategy is really more about providing the residential next to one of those retail demand centers
that already exist.
That already exists. So I call them a natural retail center, right? So in Del Rey, you've got this natural demand that comes from Atlantic Avenue.
It's walkable.
Right? It's walkable.
There's high-end restaurants, great bars, and that's where people aren't just spending money, but walking around at night. It's not your typical big box retail where you're going to get groceries.
Yeah. So the whole idea is that, and I learned this while at NRI also, was that one of the things that we were trying to do is if there are things that are expensive when you're building an entire facility, like I said, like a hotel, you know that you're going to need a restaurant. Most hotel restaurants, or in the past, a lot of hotel restaurants were actually not making money for the hotel owner and operator. So you had to do it because your hotel guests demanded it. The quality and the service and the thought that went into it was very low quality. And so you're providing the bare minimum for it, and it's not helpful. And so kind of stripping out the loss leaders of low quality hotels, you can put in a restaurant that you're leasing, and you get either lease value, or you put in a high quality management team that's going to run it, kind of independently, and you can drive a lot of value. With our strategy of the boutique multifamily sites next to what are already high performing, high demand places, the residents get the best of both worlds. And so do we on the development side, because we don't have to build the facilities. We don't have to manage the operator. So but all of our residents and all of our buyers end up with the same level of service, and maybe even better services, because all of it's sitting right there for them.
Yeah, we're kind of piggybacking off of that sticky everyday retail that people want to be near. And there's a lot of course, Florida, but the whole country that are having that missing middle because of urban sprawl and turning into these suburban neighborhoods that have always been that white picket fence dream for many Americans. But in reality, it kind of secludes you, especially for the empty nesters. And that's kind of our target market on the buy side, or for us, the sales, but our buyers.
And hopefully our brokers that we're talking to, right, our investment sales brokers and everybody like that will have the same insights that I have already read about, know about, that cap rates are lower, rents are higher, everything works better when you're next to a grocery anchored retail center or good high quality restaurants, high quality cafes, things that have access. It's all present in the data, and the brokers are the ones that should be telling that story for you when you're actually going out and trying to sell your properties.
Okay. And then one last question before we move from retail more to the capital markets world, because every day kind of in the capital markets world, and I see the value that's brought by some of those brokers. But for the retail side of things, specifically for Trader Joe's and Lifetime, can you talk through how those conversations went with those specific companies? For example, Trader Joe's, I have a ton of friends that use that Trader Joe's, right? I've been in a bunch of times, and it's a huge demand driver. Similar to now the Whole Foods that just opened up in the Forma building, right? There's people that literally just move there because the Whole Foods is there. It drives up rent on a per square foot basis for the multifamily a little over $1. So if you could just run through how the conversations went and how you just generally looked at it from the number side to just the actual end user side.
I definitely don't have enough time to talk about how many pro formas we went through in trying to structure that Lifetime deal. It is such a big component and such a big deal that we did with them that we revised it. I don't even know how many times in coming up with the additional cost that we were going to incur from redesigning the space for them, holding it out, making sure that we were putting in place all the things that they needed to operate well. And then that turned into an even larger component with Lifetime becoming the residential manager and having a deal worked out with that. So that was, could have been a project unto itself, right? Yeah. If we could have had a staff member that just worked on that, but ultimately our small team was able to handle that large part because of how we were integrated with the construction and development and operations teams all working kind of hand in hand to make that happen. And then with Trader Joe's, this was a very tumultuous time in the grocer world. And I didn't know this at the beginning of my time with NRI, but getting grocers to come into South Florida was actually a huge challenge. So
interesting,
because Publix owned all the real estate, they had all of the market share, they had all the lines of logistics, all the distributors, and the grocery world is low margin and high operational intensity, right?
Yeah.
And so a lot of grocers were worried to come down here. And even though Trader Joe's had at the time one location south of our projects, they were hesitant to come and put more in. And then at the same time, Instacart was becoming popular. Mm-hmm. And so Whole Foods was trying to expand. Kroger was trying to get into the market and bought a couple of different brands. Whole Foods was talking about spinning off and doing their 365 brand separately. There was all kinds of stuff, and we did deals with these, or had LOIs in place with a bunch of them. And so it took about 3 years of start and stop working with Trader Joe's before we could actually sign up, even with like a real LOI, and start to move forward with the amount of square feet that they needed, how the elevators would work, because going into a mixed use building is even something was newer for a lot of even the major grocery operators, because it's all about convenience for the shopper, right? Having someone pull up into a surface parking lot, walk in, get your groceries, walk out. That's like the American way, right? But when you're in an urban environment, things are different. And so it takes a lot of work kind of working those things out with them. And so, yeah, again, going back to the value driver, that your residential component is going to do so much better because you have the best gym and you have the best grocery store, the most sought after of both of those things. That's where tons of the value came from, was really securing those core retail components that people wanted to be next to.
And the gym has a daycare too. So
yeah,
of course we know in my everyday conversations with random people throughout the city, I meet tons of people that use the Trader Joe's or use that gym.